All right, hello everyone. We're going to talk a little bit about the Elementalist today. I'm going to kind of go through a handful of different places and traits and builds, and then I'll answer some questions at the end. I am playing on the dev branch, and so there's a few things I just want to call out. I've turned off skill recharges, so I can kind of bounce through and explain some different skills a little faster. And I'll also be probably resetting my traits during the stream, so just letting you know about that. So the first thing I really want to talk about on the LE is kind of some of the basics of where you can really optimize getting a lot more out of the LE than in other ways. I know there's some definite debates and difference about people who want to be in a single attunement in LE, but really the reality of the class is you have 20 skills at your disposal. You kind of have almost 4 weapon sets if you would think of it that way. And this allows you to do a lot of different things. And so if you're not really maximizing all the different attunements of an LE, you're not really playing it to its full potential. I think one of the biggest and most fun things for the LE for me is the use of your different combo fields. So one of the things that I really like to put together, and each of the weapons kind of have a set of different blast finishers, is usually the most fun one to play around with. But you also have some other combo things, and then lots of different fields. So I'm currently on staff, but you can see like a really fun thing to do is you have the Eruption skill, and you can kind of drop Eruption, and then right before it ends, drop a field, and then that'll get you a blast finisher. You can also follow it up with Arcane Wave, probably one of my favorite utility skills. The ability to do blast finishers with all the different fields on the LE can really give you a lot of different tools. You know, like even just running from place to place, you can drop an airfield and get yourself swiftness. You know, this combined with your heal skill swiftness can get you pretty much permanent swiftness for running around the maps and going from place to place. And so these combo fields are really important for maximizing the efficiency of the LE. Another kind of big thing for maximizing the efficiency of the LE is the LE naturally uses a lot more of the different stats than other professions, because other professions you can actually take weapon combinations that have very little condition damage or very heavy condition damage, and you can kind of focus your build around that. The LE, every single weapon has condition damage into it. Every single weapon has raw damage into it. And so heavily focusing on one or the other will limit your damage on a lot of your skills and limit you to a few skills that are really the raw points of your damage. So, you know, this is really why when building the LE, really try to balance out your attributes, and you can use it in a lot of different ways. It's why all stat really has a lot of effect on the LE. You know, you can do a lot of that. The new food we just put out, the kind of star cakes, are phenomenal for the LE. Because you use all these different stats a lot more than other professions would say. You know, you have a lot more healing built into your skills, you know, one-off conditions or things that are different things. So even if you're going a heavy crit damage, raw DPS build, you mixing and matching a little bit can help you. And so the combo fields definitely are a big thing to learn. You know, learn where your blast finishers are. When you're on staff, a really big one is Eruption. It's got a kind of a fun little skill timing to it because it's kind of usually lasts a little longer than the fields that you drop. And so, you know, you can do different things. But that Eruption can allow you to use your 2 water fields and heal you. You can use your ice field and give the shields to everyone. You can use airfield to get swiftness. You know, there's a lot. And then so just in those 2 skill interactions between those fields give you a whole lot. And this is true when you go through the other weapons too. You know, if you're running dagger or any of the other combinations, or you know, focus and scepter, any of those things, there's lots of different blast finishers all throughout the different weapon types. And so as you can see, you know, these blast finishers really allow you to kind of come up with almost your own skills combinations in there. Another big thing with all that is you want to use might as much as you can. You know, it's a very common thing when you're doing your builds and damage to make sure you're getting your might up in some way. But the LE, like I said, because he gets a little bit more out of a lot of, you know, having both condition damage and damage, might actually helps a lot more than it does even in other professions, because you're getting kind of a double buff out of it. And so this is why that ends up being kind of really important to manage your fire fields and your blast combos to kind of keep your building your might up. Some other ways to build your might up is, you know, Sigil of Battle. all of the swap sigils trigger while you're swapping in between attunements. And so this allows you to maximize their cooldowns. Most swap sigils have a 9-second internal cooldown, which at maximum attunements, you can swap between things at around 9 seconds. And so it becomes kind of a natural synergy just as you're playing. You don't even have to think about it. You'll be building up might while you're fighting. And this combos well with, right now the way the Ellie's set up, there's a lot of heavy desire to go into arcane and water magic. A lot of their really powerful traits are in there. And it's something I'll talk a little bit about towards the end with some balance. But let's talk about what is currently there. I think one of the most fun traits to use on the Ellie right now is Elemental Surge. You dodge a lot with the Ellie. You have very little health. You have a lot of skills, a lot of places to go, and a lot of things to do. And so dodging and setting your character up to dodge is really, really fun. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. Sorry. And so really focusing on that, and this gets you another blast combo, which is I think one of the most fun out of it. Getting the blast combo from being an earth can really get you a lot of different things, as well as the cleansing wave from water. And so that can allow you to maximize your fields even more, get an extra 3 sets of might, or go over to water, get a heal, dodge through your air, get some more swiftness, all of those types of things. One of the new traits that just came out that I think really interacts with this stuff really, really well is the Persisting Flames one, which also gives you fury while you're blasting through fire fields, and so it has a lot of kind of fun. And this is more, definitely a thing we're trying to test out, see how well some traits interacting some of the combo fields can work. And I think this one is definitely fun to play with to get some more damage and just more uptime on fury out of your builds. And so that's definitely one. Another big trait from Arcane to really bring around is Elemental Attunement. Getting the different buffs as you're swapping through, which you kind of need to naturally do when playing through your Ellie. And the big thing when you're swapping through the different attunements is you got to kind of, in your head, keep track of all these different tools that you have. You have 20 skills at your disposal, and really try to use each one of them. And you got to kind of think there's a big amount of time that when you swap to another attunement, you're not seeing it here, but they go into recharge. And so knowing how you're going to start a fight from what attunement can really change the tools that you have access to. Starting in fire and being able to throw out some stuff, and then that allows you to swap to water to get a heal, or swap to air to get a lightning strike and a little bit of some more movement, or swapping to earth because there's a big hit coming in. And the other big bit about your attunements is they're all instant. You can do them at any time, especially with Evasive Arcana. You can be in the middle of a dodge roll and realize that you actually need to remove a condition right now, or that you're about to roll into a water field and you need to heal, and you can swap to the different things. And so this becomes really important into all the different things you do, is swapping between these. And if you have like the Sigil of Battle rune, even while you're swapping around, you get that extra might right before an attack hits. That can be really fun. And so then those are really big things. And so Arcane's really, really good and powerful for kind of a lot of your abilities, multiplying them out, especially because it's reducing the speed at which you can use your attunements, and that kind of combos with all the other traits. And so, right now the Ellie is very heavy in playing around with Arcana, and a lot of the builds are focused around those types of effects. Water is another really strong line right now. I think it's probably one of the more used lines that there is. There's a lot of kind of defense and offense in the water line, so I'm going to talk through each of those. So the defense builds usually rely a lot around the cleansing water setup. You set yourself up to apply regeneration either through your skills or through a combination of cleansing water and your cantrips give regen, and so this allows you to remove conditions a lot more often, and also just naturally getting vigor helps all the other systems, because rolling around as an elementalist is really important to staying alive. Another one that's really fun if you don't want to run Sigil of Battle is the Sigil of Energy, because you are swapping around all the time. Being able to get extra endurance, almost get an entire extra dodge every time you swap within the recharge can be really huge into kind of maximizing the multiplicative effect of these traits. The other kind of fun build that people have gone around, I haven't tried it much myself, but I've read about it, is the setup where you run kind of a bunch of all of your damage traits in the Ellie, and you basically set it up so that while you're in water, you get a bunch of damage to vulnerable foes, you get damage while you're higher, you could run the Scholar gear so that you have more damage while your health is higher, which really does promote some really good play in the Ellie, kind of like try not to get hit at all, get your maximum damage without getting hit, and it has a lot of like keep moving, keep dodging, keep doing those things. And then you can kind of come up to air and pick up your damage while things are hurt, and that really allows you to maximize out. And so they'll do all this, and then they'll sit in the water line, and then you'll run Conjure Lightning and get a lot of your raw damage, but you're still in water, and so you're getting all of those damage adds kind of adding up. And it can be a really fun build to kind of get raw AoE damage out of you know, a really interesting kind of combo that's set up. And so that can be a really fun build to play around with. You know, another a big kind of new thing that I'm not sure how strong it is yet, but something that I've kind of been dabbling a little bit with is we introduced some new ways for you to get to higher condition damage. And so you can run this 10% toughness build. If you run basically the Rabid set, I like Rune of Undead with this setup. You know, that's 5% of your toughness going to condition damage, 10% from this, and then if you run your food, you get another 6%. And so, you know, all of that gets you 21% of your toughness going to condition damage. With this and like a Sigil of Corruption and, you know, getting your might stacks up, you can actually hit at max right below 3,000 condition damage, which can be really interesting in the way that stacks up. I also really like running it with Scepter and running it with the, where is it? There it is, the toughness while channeling, and that gives you like 290 toughness while you're channeling it. But this, you know, when you're throwing through some of those things, especially with your Scepter, the skill 1 over here is a channel, and so while you're throwing out, and it's probably the longest bleed application, or I mean most bleed application thing you can throw out, and it's also a projectile combo, and so you can throw down fire fields and throw those out and get both your burning and your bleeding and really stack that up. And especially when you get your burning on crits trait out of your fire line, then you know, those things can all combo together to a really interesting condition damage build. And I'm not sure if it's super awesome yet. It's a little too single focused for PvE, but it's something I've been dabbling around with and something that people might want to try out. As for food buffs, like I said, the new Star Cakes, really interesting. They're going to be a bit pricey, but you know, if you're into maximizing every point of your damage, they're a good one. I really like getting up kind of crit damage or increasing my power. The steak dinners or the new chicken that just has raw power is also really good. If you're really going to go a condition damage build, you know, your veggie pizzas are pretty much where it's at. There also can be really fun for extending things like on your staff or on your other skills, your chilling and crippling effects. When you're doing PvE and you're really trying to fight a lot of enemies at once, and if you're kind of doing staff, the way to do it is to fight, you know, 5-10 guys at once and really kind of do a AoE kiting setup. Something that can increase your condition damage can help. It can help you keep all the enemies away from you. It's a little harder to do that kind of stuff when you're fighting ranged mobs. You know, staffs doesn't have a lot of innate defense on its skills, and so, you know, you basically are running around your recharge of magnetic aura, or, you know, having to line of sight the enemies in those different ways. And so you got to be careful when doing that, because the ranged enemies can really you know, take you down. One thing that's kind of fun about the Ellie is running Greatsword with some of that stuff, and you can kind of run it for a really interesting effect. You know, the Greatsword's got a lot of damage and kind of throwing some stuff out, but what it actually has is these two skills, which are really, really high mobility for the Ellie. You know, it's something that we've been looking at the different balance here and there on the Ellie, but this Elite, one of the biggest things that I enjoy using it for is kind of the get out of jail. Right? If you're in trouble or you've overpulled, or, you know, you need to get away really fast, getting your Greatsword down and running away. Also, Burning Retreat, you can use that one. If you use the reverse camera button, not reverse camera, the turn around button, you can kind of play around with this. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but you can actually get some forward momentum out of those skills as well. But you know, a lot of your defense comes from a lot of mobility around the staff. When you get down to the other kind of weapon combinations, whether you're running daggers or focus or scepter or any of those things, you get a little bit more innate defense inside of the skills themselves. You know, especially on focus. Focus is very heavy defense. You get some escape with the dagger. You get some shocking aura. Those types of things can really help reduce your overall damage coming in. Dagger, you know, really high DPS, really up in your face. It's got some good combo fields, putting together a little bit of good mobility, very nice mix of damage and condition damage. So there's a lot of really fun DPS builds, especially in PvP and World v World. Daggers are, you know, definitely a fun and strong build to go for. Staff is something that I think it's really playing around with the use of those different combo fields. You know, in a weird way, you can be one of the better healers with this build in throwing your 2 water fields down, comboing it with your blast fields, and healing people up. You know, these things gain some points off of healing builds, so you can run some of the healing-based armors and stat combinations that we have and get some more healing out of those skills and do some fun stuff. But staff's also got a lot of kind of big AoEs. You know, I found it to be really successful in PvE when you're, you know, doing a lot of evasion and rounding up lots of things. You know, and it's really fun in World v World and the big group encounters, but when you get down to solo encounters, you know, its damage does go down. You have to work a lot at getting all your things, but so there's kind of some play there. Scepter's, you know, a little bit more single focused in some way. One of the things with Dragon Tooth, when you're running it, it also is a combo finisher, and so you can have some fun going on there. And you know, those different pieces and setting these stuff up, like Hurl ends up throwing 5 projectile combos, which can be really fun for setting up different types of condition overloads, or even just getting raw damage out of all those things. Focus, we definitely get a little bit more defense out of Focus. Obsidian Flesh is really fun. Running around Swirling Aura is really good for stopping some of those things. And Gale, very single target, but can get you some good things. And so you get a little bit of effects. I know we did, in the last update, introduce a bug with Flame Wall. It's something we will get fixed, but right now I know Flame Wall cancels itself. And so it's something that we are working on, and we'll get fixed. But those are kind of the setup for the Focus and all those different pieces. Some other kind of sigils that I think are fun to use. You got kind of like the Bloodlust or the on-kill sigils, is what I like to call them. You got kind of Bloodlust if you want to go for power. If you're really trying to do a Condi build, you can get the Corruption, and then, you know, there's the Precision version as well. And so all of those can be utilized, a lot of fun. I find it I shy a little bit more away from them as Ellie, with little low of hit points and, you know, always being a very active defense. It's easy to, you know, make a mistake in your defense and go down. And, you know, the Ellie has really powerful getting up from being downed, you know, especially with all of the persistent AoEs and damage that the Ellie can throw around. A lot of your skill damage can be triggered in, and you're in your down state, and you can fight back. And so there's a lot of kind of getting back into the fight with the Ellie. And so while the kill sigils are good and they do a lot, I find that I like to go with the swaps type of sigils a lot more. There's also just raw, you know, damage or crit that can be very effective, and I really like a lot of the on proc when I'm trying to do a very heavy condition damage build, or if I really want, you know, to get my AoE on in PvE. I like a lot of Sigil of Fire. Food, you know, I think it's going to swap around different based on what you're doing. I actually sometimes in some of my builds run Omnom Berry just to get a lot more boon duration. You know, with some of those traits and swapping through the different areas, you can get a whole lot of boons. And just by a lot of your skills can really build up boons. And so Arcane ends up being really good for just maximizing the efficiency of those boons and getting, you know, them sticking around longer. You know, this also combos really well with the water, which is I think one of the reasons why it's very popular, was the extra damage for each boon. And I know we made some changes that later. I think one of the bigger traits too that I really think, you know, bring a lot of the times when you're doing is the getting the heal off of water. It really maximizes the 15-pointer. When you are taking damage, it gets you about 1,500 without too much healing heal, and so just going into water can get you a pretty good heal right away. And then also getting your regeneration and your soothing mist water effects can really help slowly build yourself up. And if you're evading away and getting away while you're doing in the water, you can get a lot of healing and get back in the action. And so some of those are a lot of the big effects that go on. And then, depending on what damage you're doing for your utility buffs, I always really like the sharpening stones a lot for just the raw damage. But if you're going the heavy condi damage build stuff that I was kind of talking about and playing around with, you can go with some tuning crystals. Also always precision is really well in many builds, and depending on what your power at, precision can really start to pan out to being actually worth more than power in different combinations. For raw damage, I really like Divinity. It's a bit pricey, so sometimes it's hard to put together, but like I said before, the LE makes use of every stat point that you ever put in a lot more than a lot of the professions. And so I really like just all the little extra benefits you get from running all stat type of stuff. A lot of the Ascended stuff I like to run is all stat too when I'm running around this. Rune of the Scholar is also really just fun, raw, straight damage build when setting up. And I find, I saw this on the forums when I was asking some different questions, this comment as well, and I found it too, is the traits that are damage while above 90% get me into a really good mode for how playing in PvE especially is really using that active defense, using a lot of that movement, staying out of harm's way, and maximizing your damage at all time. And so I do like Rune of Scholar a lot. Another stat combo that I think is underappreciated, but I think is really good on the LE is Rampagers. The high crit, and then both condi damage and power. I like to combo that a lot with either Berserker Jewelry, and then I put Burls inside of it to get you a little bit more vitality to help you stay alive a little bit better, but it doesn't hurt your damage all that much, especially if you're running with a higher precision in some way. Then you're basically trading a little vitality, or a little precision for a little vitality between the two sets. And so I do like to mix and match my jewelry a little bit more, getting kind of spreading out my stats a little bit when I'm putting that up. And then if I'm going to run that weird condi build that I'm trying to put together and see if that's effective, I like to run the Rabid gear. But Rampagers I think is really fun. It's also a good, if you kind of want to try something a little different than going with the raw Berserkers for your damage, Rampagers is fun because you can get some extra damage out of a lot of your conditions and a lot of the other bits of your character. Another good setup, and I talked about this when I did Warrior a little bit, is that double boon duration setup. And I also sometimes like to mix in the might or a couple all stats or something. But getting that extra boon duration once again combos well with all your swapping and moving and jumping and combo fields really well. And so those can be really good and beneficial for putting that stuff together. And so I think another big thing is the different types of utility skills that you have. There's a really fun range in the different things you want to do in here. Like, you have a lot of your cantrips, very fast, very quick. Lightning Flash really has a lot of fun things that you can do with it. Because it's an instant skill, because you can do it while doing different things. You can do stuff like while you're churning Earth right before it's about to end, teleport somewhere and then blast. To a trickier degree, you can also do it some with Burning Speed, teleport right in at the last second, get the explosion effect. And so Lightning Flash has a lot of potential for different ways that you can use it. You can also use it good as an escape, trying to get out of range of things, run to different areas, but I really think there's some fun play with the closing nature of Lightning Flash. And so, your other cantrips, Mist Form's really solid, common. You're going to run around. Sometimes you're going to get in trouble, and sometimes you're going to need to use Mist Form to get yourself out of dodge. Those types of bits. The Signets, when I'm playing, I've put a couple builds together, especially my condi damage builds, with Signet of Earth. I really like the long immobilize and some of the more PvP game types, World v World, PvE, that kind of stuff, PvP, that kind of stuff. That really lets you hold your target down. Also, with kind of the build I was putting together, you wanted more toughness to maximize your condition damage, and different conditions. There's a couple fun builds you can build with a really, really long fire burn on Signet of Fire. If you take the trait up here that gives you 3 seconds more of burning, you get this up to a base of 12 seconds. You know, that plus you can get pretty close to 100% condition damage. You can get a 24-second burn with some high things. You could throw 1 burn on someone, and if they don't remove it, they die. I like Glyph of Storms a lot for PvE. You know, having the extra fields and the extra AoE effects are really good, and you know, in some ways you can kind of use all of the different Sandstorm's blind thing is really good and very underestimated, but I like a lot of those different things. You know, I talked about Arcane Wave before. The blast finisher on, you know, is really fun to play around with, really quick and easy, get some extra damage out of it. Early leveling for PvE for the Elementalist, this is a really good one. That extra damage and just access to, you know, earlier boons and things like that for your profession is really fun. You know, there's, with the different heals, there's lots of different play between some of these. You know, Signet of Restoration with some really spammy builds can yield some really decent healing over time, especially when you combo it up with the other healing. You can get a lot of kind of heal yourself back up and run away type of setups. And so some of those are big builds. So some questions that I saw on the forums, and I'll answer some of those as going through this, is, you know, are we ever going to kind of focus on really single or dual attunement builds? I think some of the goal is the LE class is about a lot of attunement swapping. I think there's some examples of that. We did one recently, it was called Fresh Air trait, just seeing how that played around. It feels like it's opened up some interesting abilities for you to kind of be in air, swap out of air, fight a little bit more, but get back to air constantly. And so that's really interesting. I'd like to see how those builds develop and where they're going. But there's a lot of fun, especially because when you're in there, you get your lightning strike on Ellie, so you can kind of get a lightning strike very often with air, and also it can trigger the while you go into air a lot. And so there's a lot of kind of interesting play, and we're really wanting to look at that and see how that comes out to getting that. But we really want the Ellie to be about swapping attunements and mastering between the skills, and so, you know, we'll play up that more in the different traits and skills and changes and things. But I don't think we really want an Ellie to sit in one attunement and not really change out of it and just blast away. I think that's not exactly what the profession's about. And then mobility was another thing that came up. You know, I think through our balance changes, you've seen us kind of trimming down mobility a little bit here and there, and that's been a big thing that we want the LE to have different roles in combat. Some of the things that we really like about the LE is the fact that they can swap between different abilities. You can be very heavy on damage, whether you're comboing your skills, and then you can kind of swap to a mode where you're being more defensive, whether you're using your fields for healing or trying to run away. And we don't want the LE to be the best mobile character in the game. We're okay with them having some mobility, because they kind of need to go in and out, but they shouldn't be the fastest, quickest, get around the map, get in between places than everyone else. And so we've been trying to kind of make some small tweaks to that as we've been going, and I think we're getting to a happy place about where some of the mobility is. You know, we like when some of the mobility comes from some bigger trade-offs like the elite skill and running away. It's interesting, but that's something we're kind of still looking at and going. You know, the LE has a lot of ability to kind of shift the things that they do during combat and kind of shift even just your focus on what your plan, whether it's doing raw damage, focusing down a single target, getting into a defensive mode, healing up yourself, healing up allies. You really have this ability to kind of shift between focus and really change up your play, your skills. And so a lot of the traits and skills that allow you to more amplify that effect are some of the things that I think a lot of people build right now. Another question was, the LE seems really locked into a lot of water and arcane right now, and it is definitely something that we're trying to get out of. It's some of the reason why I like playing around with fresh air was a thing. You know, we don't want anyone to be so locked into one or two lines that it makes it harder for their builds to kind of change over time. So it's something we'll always look into. I think some of the traits that have lined up in water and attunement and arcane are really fun to play, and so we're trying to find counterparts in other ways. But we don't, you know, we feel like those things make the LE where they are, so we'll keep kind of playing around with different traits and different combinations in order to try to increase build diversity. But that's kind of what our thought is on it right now. Another kind of question, I know there was some questions about the comments of Jack of all trades, master of none, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think when you have a profession that has access to this many types of abilities, comboing with itself, a little bit of mobility, some defense in different ways, some CC, condition damage, raw damage, spike, those types of things. They have access to a lot of different types of things to do, and you have to be careful, because if any one of those things becomes just as powerful as other professions who are entirely designed to do that, or entirely set up, this is a big build of theirs is to be heavy into that, then when you have the comparison with someone that can do that and a bunch of other little things, it makes that profession so much better than all the other professions. And so that's why that's kind of that thought and that process is we want the LE to be able to swap between powerful modes and swap between really successful things, but we don't want them to overshine other abilities because they innately come with a lot of different things that they can do. And so a lot of our kind of focus on balance has been trying to maximize those other kind of play styles or different things. And I think we're experimenting around with it, especially when you see us playing with like the Persistent Flames one was like, hey, what about how could the LE do some more comboing with himself, because that's a really fun and interesting gameplay with it, or how do we make a new pattern. And so those are some of kind of our mindset of where we're looking at with those type of changes. And so I think those are some of the big bits about the Elementalist right now, and kind of my quick take on how to set some of those stuff up. And really, I think deciding the direction you want to go, and don't be careful about over-speccing into one setup unless you really set your bar up. Like I think the Conjure Lightning build's a good example of really heavy speccing into one really specific type of damage, and it's fun. It gets you a lot of really raw damage, but trades off with a lot of different things. But I like to kind of mix my attributes up, really mix them with Divinity Rune and that type of stuff, and allows you to bounce back and forth between a few different things. Especially in PvE, you can kind of switch between a staff build or a dagger build, or depending on the type of content that you're working on or who's around with you at the time. And as always, don't forget food buffs. Food buffs really help the LE out in a lot of different ways, because you can kind of counter or mix and match the different stat combos you have. And the Star Cakes has been a really fun food playing around with the LE because it gets you a lot. And so those are some different builds and some different ideas that I have. As always, thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed.